Ladies and gentlemen, as it will still take some minutes to get ready for the first panel, let me begin. Let me first start from all the housekeeping. We are streamed live, so whatever you say, whatever you do is on camera. And we work in two languages, English, which you will hear in this room predominantly, and Polish. So if you don't understand one of them, please collect a headset. They're available out on the other side of the entrance door. We have volunteers, most of them wearing grey shirts, who are helping us throughout the conference. Thank you very much. And lo and behold, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to begin the second day of the conference, Europe and Mobilities, part of the Polish presidency. The subtitle is Challenges and Opportunities for Socio-Economic Transformations. And challenges and opportunities are something we've heard a lot about yesterday. But may I now welcome all the participants to the second day, participants present here in body and in bandwidth, thanks to all those marvels of technology. Welcome and thank you for being here, logging in or turning up today. It is good morning here in Warsaw, but when I looked at the map where you're coming from, I see that it's also good afternoon, good evening, and good middle of the night, judging by the countries you connect from. The conference is organized by the University of Warsaw. To be more precise, these are the Center of Excellence in Social Sciences and the Center of Migration Research, with the support of National Science Center Poland and the National Center for Research and Development, as well as the Ministry of Science and Higher Education of the Republic of Poland. It is one of the key events of the Polish presidency of the Council of the European Union. We're grateful to the European Union, by the way, for all the funding, and grateful to the Government of the Republic of Poland for co-funding. Our honorary patrons are two committees of the Polish Academy of Science, the Committee on Migration Research and the Committee on Demographic Studies. Our media partners are TOK FM and Oko Press. Yesterday, we started with welcomes and an expert keynote speech and have gone through 3 out of 7 thematic sessions covering migration and demography. Today, we go for another 3 to close with the other keynote address. Please note that there are breaks, and please note that we really need those minimum 15 minutes for coffee, so I will be unfortunately cutting all the sessions on time, even if they start somewhat later. Please also note that the views and opinions expressed here are those of the speakers and not necessarily reflect those of the European Union or the organizers. Therefore, neither the European Union nor the organizers can be held responsible for such opinions. Right, time for the views and opinions on democratic backsliding, which can only mean one thing. Session 4 is about to begin. Is it possible to make the society resilient, or best immune, against democratic backsliding? Well, time to receive the answer, and possibly many others, from the panel, with introduction by Mr. Łukasz Zamęcki of University of Wrocław, chaired by Agnieszka Lichnerowicz, TOK FM. Have I mentioned the media already? And distinguished speakers, Tzu-Li from Tunghai University, Szabolcs Panyi, investigative journalist, Łukasz Zamęcki, University of Warsaw, and Anna Wojciuk, University of Warsaw. Well, the floor, the lectern, and the presidium table are yours.
Okay, now, yes. Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. Greetings to Wrocław, although I was born and raised and working in Warsaw. Thank you very much for the possibility to present that. Hopefully I do not compete with the coffee, but believe me, the topic is so important that the emotion probably will be raised anyway without the coffee. Ladies and gentlemen, I was asked to prepare a short introduction, a kind of state of art I tried to prepare the clear and brief, a brief presentation, but please remember that I'm a person of academia, so if I will manage the time poorly, please give me any size. We are talking today about democratic backsliding. At the beginning, I thought that it would be good to emphasize and underline why we talk about democratic backsliding. This concept and this term became quite popular, although it doesn't mean that the autocratization issue, democratic erosion, is something recent, something new. But you can notice I just used the simple Google Ngrams to present how often the terms like democratic backsliding, like democratic recession, erosion, autocratization occurs in the scientific literature. So we can notice that since, let's say, last 2 decades, we have a greater emphasis on those terms. This is probably also due to the, let's say, new form of backsliding, new form of autocratization, although those concepts are not the synonyms, but I will be using them a few times during that presentation. Probably this is also tied to the issue that last, let's say, about 20 years we observe, according to the international indexes like VIDEM, Democracy Index, and all the other, we can notice a kind of rise of non-liberal democratic systems or even non-democratic systems around the world. So that's why researchers, let's say, also try to study that. And I would like to start with, let's say, a bit classic already paper of Nancy Bermeo. She underlined that we spent a lot of time when it comes to explaining why democracies break down, but we work less on how they break down. And what we can notice in that new third wave of autocratization around the world, let's say, is that those processes tend to be more incremental. What she studied and what she noticed, that classic open-ended coup d'etats now are in the form of, let's say, below the radar changes that very often we don't even notice them. They are more incremental, so they are even harder to study. We do not have dramatic, let's say, executive coups, but we can observe a process of executive aggrandizement. So democratic backsliding starts with, let's say, the situation that the executive branches takes more power. The parliament became silent. It's only a kind of voting machines nowadays. So this is what we can observe nowadays. And when it comes to those recent studies on democratic backsliding, we can also notice, for instance, thanks to the Haggard and Kaufman, that the process of the democratic backsliding is quite similar, no matter if we talk about Hungary, Poland, United States, or Brazil. Very often the precursor of the democratic backsliding starts with the political polarization, strong political polarization, affective polarization, which allows populists to gain the majority in the parliament. Of course, that's nice for the populist if it's supported, let's say, by the electoral system. So, for instance, majority system, it's easier then to win the election. And the first step, let's say, which we can observe around the world in those processes of democratic backsliding is weakening of check and balances. And we could also observe that, let's say, in Poland, attack on some independent institution and independent bodies. Then the second stage is the process of limiting the rule of law and civil liberties. So the changes of the civil liberties, this is, let's say, the second stage of those changes. And at the end of that process, we have electoral manipulation. So the democratic backsliding normally, let's say, start with democratic elections, winning the election by the populists, but the next election, it's quite possible that won't be any more free and competitive. When it comes to the studies of democratic backsliding, we can observe a different perspective. This is quite normal when we hear among the people of academia the perspectives, theoretical perspective which are used were kind of summed up by Waldner and Lust. So we have a lot of studies from the perspective of agency-based theories, political culture, institutional theories, theories of political economy. Very often we talk that, let's say, the reasons, the causes of democratic backsliding also lies somewhere in the economic issues. But we have more and more also studies, for instance, regarding the international factors and the pressure from, let's say, outside on the autocratization changes. And we do not have probably so much time to discuss about all the, let's say, reasons, all the causes that starts democratic backsliding. But as I said a few seconds ago, we have, let's say, some main researches and traits, let's say, when it comes to those studies. Of course, we use that perspective of economic crises, economic inequalities. But what's interesting, the reasons, economic reasons, are not so, let's say, obvious. We have plenty of studies. You can check quite a recent book, a handbook of autocratization, where in one of the chapters we have a summary of all the, let's say, economic backgrounds of democratic backsliding, and we see that studies differ somehow when it comes to the role of those economic factors. But what we can notice, unequal democracies are more likely to experience, let's say, backsliding. This is one of the issue which is already quite nice studied. Or the role, for instance, what is interesting, especially in those digital autocrats, the role of the higher classes that support some forms of authoritarianism. When it comes to the cultural issue, I would like to notice, to emphasize the role of something what Pippa Norris called cultural backlash. So that very often those changes, populist changes, are kind of reaction against the too fast spread of progressive values, that some people have a feeling that they lost centrality, let's say, in the society, that they were so important 20, 30 years ago, and nowadays they talk about some progressive values, but not about us, ordinary people. This is maybe nostalgic deprivation is maybe not, let's say, the main field of studies, but I would like to also emphasize that we have interesting studies on not the objective factors, but a kind of perceived loss of economic, political, and social status. Nice studies done in United States, United Kingdom, that people with those nostalgic deprivation supports the mostly right-wing populists. And of course, we have also a lot of studies on decline trust in democracy. This is a huge body of literature on that issue. So when it comes to kind of sum up, we also noticed that recent years we have a lot of studies on polarization. This is now a totally separate, let's say, field of studies, the role of polarization. I especially do not underline here if we talk about social polarization, political polarization, affective polarization, but anyway, all forms of polarization. The role of the history of democracy in the country, the support for democracy, and the attitudes, political attitudes toward democracy, and of course the role of the economics. When it comes to University of Warsaw, we also try to conduct the studies on democratic backsliding. So I would like to underline, let's say, two areas of the studies that we've conducted last years. From one of those areas is the role of local governments during the de-democratization processes. So what is the role of local bodies, institutions, cities in the processes of democratic backsliding? And the second, let's say, part of those studies conducted last year at the University of Warsaw emphasized the role of the crisis situation like pandemic, for instance, COVID-19 on democratic backsliding. We could observe that not only in Poland, but also also in other countries, that democratic backsliding was, that the pandemic was used as a reason also to, let's say, emphasize the role of the autocrats and to support that process of executive aggrandizement. We have a lot of studies on the issues when the democratic backsliding starts. Since I underlined that it's a kind of incremental process nowadays, below the radar, it's not easy to notice somehow the momentum when it happens. It also means which kind of, let's say, fields of the democracy are attacked by those populists. I would like to show you the Andrea Cassani and Luca Tomini studies on, let's say, the forms of autocratization process. They prefer to use the term autocratization process and how, let's say, limitation on executive changed the systems from the liberal democracy into the defective democracy, how the limited contestation in the state changed this defective democracy into electoral autocracy, and how it's end with the limiting of the participation toward the closed autocracies. So this is also the huge body, huge literature on those issues. But of course, this is very often connected to the definition of liberal democracy. So mostly election, participation, human rights, and rule of law. So those three forms, let's say, of accountability: horizontal, vertical accountability, and diagonal accountability in democratic states. So at the end of that short introduction, what kind of problems we have when we study democratic backsliding. I already said about this incremental process that they are hard to observe. We have also kind of tensions when it comes to the defining key elements of democracy. The issue is that we need very often normative judgments in our studies on democratic backsliding. This is also connected to how to study the democratic backsliding. We had a very influential, let's say, paper by Andrew Little and Meng about that maybe this is not true that we observe this huge democratic backsliding around the world because we use expert-coded studies, and when it comes to objective indicators, they do not always support, let's say, the idea of this broad autocratization around the world. The role of heterogeneous social and political context. For instance, today we have the speakers from Europe, but also from Asia, totally different political and cultural context. And of course, the discussion about the data. This is what we still lack. We have, of course, the studies of Freedom House, VIDEM, the economies, but anyway, we still need the proper data to study that democratic backsliding. This is the short introduction to our discussion. Hopefully I managed the time. Thank you very much, and I will sit with my colleagues. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, hello, good morning. I will have the pleasure now to moderate the panel among this honorable and distinguished guests. And before we start, I would like to underline one technical issue. I would like to welcome all of you to join us with your questions or opinions at the end of the discussion. We would like to propose you to, come with some questions. So if they come up to you, please keep them in mind, and we will try to integrate them into our discussion. That will take place for another, let's say, 1 hour and 15 minutes, I guess. So I would like to start with also based on what Professor Zamęcki has just presented, with mapping, so stating what is the state of things, what is this moment, what are the main trends, and I would like to start with you, Professor Wojciuk, because we are here in Poland, and our honorable guests also probably are aware that we are after very hot and very controversial elections. So I wanted to ask you first, where are we on these mappings that Professor Zamęcki has just presented? Has it started? So how was it so far? Could you shortly somehow synthesize and describe the situation? And what is your prognosis? What can we expect? What are the scenarios?
How much time for this?
Like 4 minutes.
Okay. So as Professor Zamęcki said, currently the threat to democracy comes from authoritarian populists, and except from Venezuela, they tend to be right-wing populists, unlike in the Cold War, when this threat came both from the left and from the right. What is striking is the diversity of countries in which those phenomena happen. There is very narrow common denominator between them. They differ in everything. We have right-wing populists everywhere. In some places they are in power. Almost everywhere they are in opposition. We see them in countries of global north, global south, winners and losers of knowledge-based economy. To quote Torben Iversen, US and UK, of course, are discussed as losers of this knowledge-based economy, but countries like Poland, like our country here, is clearly a winner of knowledge-based economy, because this is here where those chains of production are moving, and we are clearly beneficiaries of knowledge-based economy. So why here? We see it in countries that have problems with migration, like Western countries, but we also see it in countries that do not have it, like Brazil or India. We see it, furthermore, in both democracies and autocracies. We see authoritarian in autocratic countries. We see right-wing populism in China. There are amazing studies, like, for example, by Chen Zhang, showing grassroots right-wing populism in China. So this is something really amazing and striking. And where is Poland on this map? So we are a country that grew by 600% in last 35 years in GDP, purchasing power parity in real terms. So it's a huge growth. And our inequalities were kept in a median European level. So I believe Poland is a very difficult case for the Marxist explanation of the causes of democratic backsliding. You see our rural population benefiting from EU funds within agricultural policy. You see Polish farmers exempt from social security insurance payments and also having tax privileges. So honestly, this is one of the most privileged groups economically in these countries, yet they consistently support right-wing populists. This is what we will discuss in our book, Let's Agree on Poland, Oxford University Press, coming up in October this year. So we will study this case, why and what to do. So now moving directly to your questions. So after these elections lost by the candidate of the Democratic side, we are in the process of learning more about the cycle. So in many countries, of course, there are governments which managed to establish a system in which they cannot lose elections, like Hungary and Turkey for now. But we see also right-wing populists ousted, like in the US, Poland, and Israel. And with the Democratic side believing that once eventually the Democratic side will win, they will explain, educate, show the wrongdoings of the right, corruption, and then the support for right-wing populism will decrease. That's not happening. And very often we see that these tend to be short episodes after which right-wing populists are back. There is evidence, for example, by a paper by Michał Zurn, Daniel Weiner, Sandra Destradi in International Affairs, showing that the longer right-wing populists are in power, the more aggressive they become. And they become especially aggressive when they are ousted and then they are voted in again, because they have stronger mandate, because it can be assumed that voters wanted them not because they were manipulated, but they really know what they want and they are voting for that. So this is the case here. And the last point, I think what the Polish case teaches us, just like all other cases, is that the future of democracy cannot depend on the fact that the democratic forces will keep winning. Because the nature of democratic system, to quote Adam Przeworski, democracy is a system in which ruling parties lose elections. So in order to solve this problem, we have to think what to do in order to be able to lose elections and not lose democracy. I think this is the major challenge of our times. And I think that we need to find a compromise with the right. Just like during the Cold War, the democratic forces made compromises toward the communist parties moving into social democratic agenda, which in my view was a very good thing, but it was a compromise. I think we need to make a compromise with the right. And also this is what our work, Let's Agree on Poland, is about. So we propose a social contract between the right and the left and the liberals, in which we will allow different cultural values to flourish in different parts of Poland, because we believe that especially in Poland, this conflict is mainly about cultural issues. Really, with Marx's hypothesis, it's very hard to find a lot of evidence for that. So I think Polish case is very strongly indicating that it's about the cultural conflict and cultural status loss, about which Łukasz mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. We will come back to this question at the third phase of our discussion, so we can talk more about how to counter or mitigate. But now maybe a word from Szabolcs Panyi from Hungary, an investigative journalist. Their work actually proves how important is journalism. So is it what Professor Wojciuk said, is it possible for now having the full power, Viktor Orban to lose the next elections, because we see new dynamic we have been observing? And what is also this dynamic? Is the autocratization process going on and becoming stronger?
Yes, thank you for inviting me, and I just took some notes here. You had a quote that populists are getting more aggressive, and that's actually what we're seeing in Hungary right now. Full disclosure, I'm not an academic. I'm an investigative journalist, so I track the decision makers and I follow the money, not so much the trends in society. But even following the behavior of Viktor Orban and his government tells a lot about how they perceive their own power, and how it's clearly slipping away. I guess no one in this room needs an introduction about how Hungary became a so-called illiberal democracy, a term that Viktor Orban openly endorsed back in 2014. I just want to quote one interesting fact from our elections in 2014, which was the first re-election of Viktor Orban's new regime after he already changed the country's constitution. He already had a two-third majority in parliament, and he won the re-election in 2014 with 45% of the vote share. Actually, it was 44.9%. But this was already transformed into a 67% two-thirds supermajority in parliament, which made it possible for him to basically consolidate this new regime that he created. And I guess this is a very special example within the European Union, and something that differentiates Hungary from Poland, that Viktor Orban, throughout his rule since 2010, had a supermajority in parliament. First, it was like a natural decision of the electorate, but then it needed electioneering, and it needed him to change the constitution. And throughout the years, he entrenched himself so much that basically, currently we're in a situation where we don't know what's going to happen next year. We don't know if we are going to have free and fair elections or not. We don't know if, for example, journalists or or civil society leaders will get jailed or pushed out of the country or not. The thing is that this is really uncharted waters for Hungary because, as I said, our election system was changed in a way that if there's a single party that gathers the vote of 48% of the voters, then that party will have a supermajority and can do whatever they want with the country. And now all the polls are showing that it's not Viktor Orbán's ruling Fidesz party, but a new opposition party that is leading in the polls. And in some surveys, it's on the verge of being over that threshold that it could actually even have a two-third majority in parliament. So currently we see that the system that Viktor Orbán tailored on himself throughout these past 15 years is suddenly becoming even a threat for himself. And this is, for example, why we are seeing in this past 1 year more and more new laws or draft laws that are proposed that are trying to limit the scope of public debate, either by banning the Pride March in Hungary, or by trying to force the opposition leader to file an asset declaration where if there's only a minor mistake, he could be stripped of his mandate in the European Parliament because he's a member of the European Parliament. And that's why we've seen this recent proposed law, which was aimed at basically creating a blacklist of so-called foreign-funded media and civil society organizations. So we are entering a phase in Hungary where the government is clearly copy-pasting Russia-style laws, but at the same time, they are losing the popular support. And we just don't know if they have the will, if they have the courage to push through these legislations, or even if they push them through, will they have the popular support to execute these? So we really don't know what is going to happen. When I was preparing for this panel, I was suggesting some topics to talk about. For example, this new law that I mentioned, which would create a blacklist that would essentially make it impossible even for my own Hungarian outlet to operate. But yesterday we received the news that because of internal debates within the government, they postponed the approval process indefinitely of this law, which also
is a win from your perspective.
it is a win because it shows that there's a lot of hesitation and uncertainty even within the government. The prime minister and his inner circle wants to move forward to consolidate that power, but even within the regime, there are more sane or moderate people who know what the consequences would be for those moves.
So I guess there was one point about the reaction of the European Union to. So is it possible for you to summarize it like in 2 minutes?
Well, I've been invited to Brussels, to the European Parliament, and also to speak at some EU Commission meetings a number of times in this past 15 years. I knew exactly that basically the chances that the European Commission would act upon our recommendations is quite minimal. You're all familiar with the so-called rule of law conditionality mechanism that was created exactly because of Poland and Hungary. This is the first legal tool that could be used to somehow, at least in cases where there's corruption or very blatant violation of EU law, then this would give a tool for the Commission to act. But in the case of Hungary, this mechanism was implemented already too late. Viktor Orbán has entrenched himself so much that basically he can also twist these what he perceives as an attack on Hungary's sovereignty by the elite in Brussels. He can play the victim card, and he can show that that he's the strong leader who's not willing to give up the conservative values of Hungary. So even these so-called pressures by the European Commission are not actually useful in a way that they don't really seem to help Hungarian society. And currently what we also see is that Viktor Orbán actually accuses its opposition and seems to be capitalizing on this argument that the opposition is siding with the European Commission in preventing Hungary from accessing EU funds. So it's actually the opposition that's preventing Hungarians to receive money that they deserve from Brussels. So it's a double-edged sword, I have to say.
Thank you. And Professor Tzu-Li, I even read that democracy is a core part of Taiwan's civic identity. It's one of the Asia's strongest liberal democracies. But in recent months or years, we hear more and more worries about the conditions. So can you pinpoint what's the core of these problems and why is it strong still?
Thank you for your question. And I would like to thank you, Professor Zamęcki, to invite me and Congress have me in here. It's my second time to Warsaw, and I really enjoyed this city. And I have another mission in our university, not just a professor, but also we have a team. We go to the central Taiwan's high school and to tell them the global tendency of democratic backsliding and the democratic resilience. Why we do that? Because you all know the China threat to Taiwan is real. And for a long time, they try to tell us that democracy is inefficient and the Chinese dream is better for Taiwan's future. Because they know Taiwan, our that kind of people's willing are not want to become part of China. So the best way they try to convince us is democracy is not reliable. Democracy is not fit for Taiwan's future. However, our young people, they burn with democracy. For them, democracy is just like water and air. It's just normal. However, you know, the social media, the fake news influence our young children very much. And for them, somehow, democracy is not that important. So that's why we have a team. Every week, we go to different high school and tell them, yes, democracy is not perfect. And yes, around the world, a lot of countries, they suffer the democratic backsliding. However, in thinking about the ranking in the world of Taiwan's democracy, we are 12th within 167 countries. So according to the Foreigner magazine, Foreigner Free House, this all in investigation, our economic or democratic performance are well. But I think it is not enough because we have we see the case, especially the professor already mentioned, inequality is also serious in Taiwan. And the political priority also important. We have two groups in Taiwan. One is more pro-China. They support one China principle, think the future of Taiwan, if we want to have peace, and we need to accept one China. And we have the other group, fortunately, is larger. And we believe our Taiwan autonomy, we won't say independent anymore because it's unreal. So we claim we own our destiny, we own our identity, and we insist the Taiwan autonomy. And this group, luckily, is around 65, 67%. It's much, much bigger than pro-China group. So yes, we also have the challenge, or we also have the, but as I say, when the threat from China is bigger, our willing to resist it is stronger. Yeah, that's my short answer.
But could I ask a little bit more about why there are worries about the condition of Taiwanese democracy? Why they have been recently more and more informations that this ideal almost Taiwanese democracy is failing. As I understand, there is a discussion about the independence of also constitutional court, as we have had here, and the issue of polarization. But
Yes.
Can you say a little bit more how problematic it is?
Okay. Mainly, I will say is the political competition, because the opposition party, if they want to win the next election, how do they prove and they are better than the ruling party? And the best way is not only corruption, but also they hurt the democracy. That's the main excuse. And the opposition party, the famous one is KMT. This party's leader accused our president is Hitler. And you know it's not true, because and even the German office in Taipei, they against this kind of accuse. So you can see mainly this kind of worry. Yes, we need to monitor, we need to check the ruling party, do they hurt or invade the democracy or not? But I will say mainly is the political competition. They use this against the ruling party, say yes, they influence the justice, they influence the court decision, they use this. But on the other side, we need to understand our Taiwanese people want to balance the competition between KMT and the DPP. DPP is the ruling party. That's why the presidential seat is belong to DPP. However, the KMT and the TPP, the other small party, they control the parliament. So we want check and balance between their competition. At the same time, the final bottom line is still democracy.
Professor Zamęcki, I thought that maybe I could ask you to summarize. I know that there have been hours and hours of discussions, and there are many, many reasons, but is it possible to understand why is it happening now in so many places, and as Professor Wojciuk mentioned, in so many different, let's say, styles? Is it possible to understand why is this third wave now?
During my short introduction, State of Art, I underlined few, let's say, the main lines of explaining the reason of that democratic backsliding. I personally really tend to emphasize the role of this, what Pipa Norris called the cultural backlash. Because what Professor Wojciuk mentioned, populism is not observed and autocratization only in, let's say, less progress countries or high progress countries. This is not so much tied. So I have a feeling that we should focus on that axiological, let's say, part. Even Max, Professor Lin from Taiwan, mentioned the role, let's say, of social media, young people. We are losing the battle probably somewhere here. More and more people have the feeling that the changes are maybe too fast and they lost their position, even if it's not, we do not have objective indicators. So like in Poland, we could have, let's say, economic progress and in the same time raise of the populist voices, because we are, let's say, pushed to the corner with the discussion that yes, we are attacked by some progressive changes, values, and so on. So that's why I also emphasize that nostalgic deprivation, that we have a feeling it was better 20, 30 years ago. You can observe that, for instance, now when we see the Donald Trump, that if we go back to the economy like 30 years ago, everything will be okay. I'm afraid that this is not the solution, but this is one of those new trends, let's say, of this autocratization process, this performative autocratization, authoritarianism. It's spread by its own media, by the role of the social media too, which we, as probably people older than our children, we do not use so much and we do not understand them. Of course, it's easier when we have this polarization, yes, which I also mentioned. But it's interesting that this autocratization is also supported by kind of new, let's say, process, which probably 15, 20 years ago was not so visible, a kind of populist network. I know that Professor Wojciuk also studied that issue. In the 70s, in the 80s, we heard about kind of communist international, yes, but now we can observe support, logistic support, narrative support, this media support by the populists around the world. So this is also something what can, let's say, support this growing of the populist nowadays. And Professor Wojciuk used that quotation about the democracy. I would like to add another quotation, which I really like, that we have the democracy when the democratic form of grasping the power is the only game in the town. The issue is that too many people, and like also Professor Lin mentioned, for some people, this is probably not only game in the town anymore. Let's say that we have another form of let's say, dealing with the economy. Although long-term studies prove that democratic management is much more efficient than the autocratic, but it's easy, let's say, to win the social media competition that, yeah, when we have a strong leader, it's easier, let's say, to solve the economic problems without the discussion, very fast, efficient, 48 hours for a legislation. Yes, we are so strong and powerful, and you see, we can do a lot. We forget that democracy is about the discussion, debates, and then we have better results.
So, Professor Wojciuk, as far as this right-wing Comintern is concerned, could you assess how strong is it, or how meaningful is it at this moment? How successful, and how much Donald Trump, that is the president of the contemporary empire, is kind of also the Caesar of this Comintern, or it works in some different ways? Is this power centralized in Washington around, as far as this network is concerned?
Mm-hmm. So actually, I haven't studied it myself, so I cannot refer to my own research. I'm referring to Mihai Varga, Katarina Blum mainly, and so their studies and their co-authors. Basically, we know that those new right or new conservative networks started to develop in late 90s under Bush administration, when neocons in the Bush administration embraced what we could call a neoliberal agenda. And with the fact that the right actually agreed with the left on major human rights, because when we look at I know people like Condoleezza Rice, yes, for sure we may be critical, but in terms of human rights, this is the essential hegemonic consensus of the liberals. And at that time, from what I know from other studies, we see the establishment of some different, like, paleo-conservative networks that want to restore. It's about restoration of the values from before, I know, the domination of the Enlightenment consensus. This is how I would call it, to more traditional values, traditional family. And so I think those networks in the US connected with both American Catholic Church and evangelical churches is spreading in many countries of both for example, South America, especially Brazil. They are very strongly dominated. So there is huge learning process where Brazilian radical right is learning from American radical right and vice versa, because of course it's mutual. So here I see one of the nodes, important nodes of those networks. Secondly, Mihai Varga is showing the networks of intellectuals emerging at the beginning of our century, which connect Russian intellectuals with intellectuals from East Central Europe that also promote return to healthy conservatism, normal family, traditional roles of women in families. And clearly many countries of post-Soviet area have these kinds of connections. I would say Poland is not that much connected, but still you have people like Leszek Sikorski who meet with Dugin, and you have those narratives even in Poland, which is extremely anti-Russian, but you have it. So this is my second point, and my third point. Unfortunately, I believe that really Viktor Orban is a major innovator in that domain. I believe a month ago I was on a workshop on right-wing populist foreign policy in Jerusalem with scholars from all over the world studying it. And at the beginning we had the introductory meeting, and we got photographs of different populists, and everyone was supposed to choose the one thinks is the most important, and I selected Viktor Orban because I think it's not a big deal to be influential if you are running a country like the United States, but if you're running a country like Hungary, which is a small country, a peripheral country from the point of view of the world, and have so much impact on other countries. And of course you could see when I was on a study trip to Hungary a year and a half ago, also on that occasion, although in Poland I met Szabolcs, I visited all the Danube Institute, all those right-wing think tanks. It's an amazing infrastructure, and I believe that currently liberal side does not have this kind of attractive infrastructure. I met, of course it's an amazing building in the best part of Budapest, and you have the scholars from all over the world who clearly earn a lot. They distance themselves from Viktor Orban, but money, as the Romans said, can be an incentive. So I was surprised how much international stuff is happening in Hungary. Also, the Ludovika University, where they bring people from the right, from all over Europe, give them jobs. Also, people from Law and Justice in Poland who lost influence in Poland after PIS lost elections. Some of them got jobs there. So really Hungary is a safe haven for this right-wing international, not to mention Minister Romanowski, who found also safe haven against Polish justice system in Hungary, was given asylum by Viktor Orban. So I think that given the resources and the scale, I believe that really Viktor Orban is a super important element of this network. And my final point would be East Central Europe as a laboratory right-wing populist agenda, and I would say that it's here, and this is perhaps Jarosław Kaczyński, not Viktor Orban, who was the most audacious, bringing up front the very conservative agenda about abortion rights, anti-LGBT. Maybe anti-LGBT Viktor Orban was first, but I think with abortion, clearly PIS was on the most innovative side, to use this word. And you remember on the first Trump, Georgette Mosbacher was actually constraining PIS government. But now on the second Trump administration, you see Donald Trump having this kind of agenda. And my point would be that it's the success of these kinds of policy proposals in East Central Europe that is motivating the actors all over the world to go further, even though it may look very risky to use this kind of agenda. But when you polarize, you don't look at the center, but you try to create conflict. So clearly, I think here it's where Poland was on the side of innovating. Thank you.
So, Szabolcs Panyi, how are you exporting it? How is Viktor Orban, of course, exporting it?
Again, I want to emphasize, so as an investigative journalist, my angle here is that what you describe is true, but it's financed by Hungarian taxpayers. So it's our money that's being spent on not just a partisan agenda, but also on political endeavors in foreign countries. That's not how public money should be spent while we have our hospitals in ruins and a completely underfinanced healthcare system. I also have a different perspective on why Viktor Orban does these things. And I think that maybe I'm just too fixated on Russian influence in Hungary, but how I see it is that he's emulating Russian methods, but within the European Union's legal context. So he's taking already working tools, network building ideas, but he doesn't have a KGB, obviously, to bribe, I don't know, fellow travelers and useful idiots in the West. What he can do is that he can spend Hungarian public money creating institutions that then put conservative intellectuals on the payroll who then write favorable opinions of Viktor Orban, and some of them happen to be friends with J.D. Vance or other people close to Donald Trump. So this is spending money on infiltrating, for example, the U.S. president's inner circle, and Viktor Orban is mostly doing this because it's offensive defense. In order for his regime to survive, he needs to shield himself both from pressure from the United States administration and also from pressure coming from the European Commission, the European Union. And this more intellectual part of his far-right network building is clearly aimed at previously undermining the Biden administration or whatever Democratic administration there was in power, because they were heavily criticizing Viktor Orban's government. They were putting some government officials on US sanctions lists. And what Orban could do to counter these hostile activities was to try to undermine the democratic administrations and to support and to bet on the return of the Republican Party into power, and he succeeded in that. And there's also the network that he's building both in Central Europe and the wider European Union. Again, this is also offensive defense. This is to create an alliance of reliable countries that could shield Hungary from an Article 7 procedure. So the EU's tool to strip a country of its voting rights. but also to try to water down any kind of measures that are aimed against Hungary. The way for Orban to do that is to try to support as many allies in Poland, in the Czech Republic, in Slovakia, or we can also quote the examples of a Hungarian state-linked bank financing the previous presidential election campaign of Marine Le Pen, or most recently financing the campaign of the Spanish far-right Vox party. So Orban's endgame here is to have as many allies in power in their respective countries as possible, so that they can repay these favors and, for example, help Hungary access its EU funds, or at least help Hungary avoid being punished with an Article 7 procedure. So this is really about the survival of his regime at its core. But of course, at the same time, he's someone who does have at least regional ambitions. So this alliance is also consisting of politicians who owe favors to Orban, and he expects them at some point to return these favors, and he just enjoys meddling and influencing in other countries' politics. But at the same time, again, I'm an investigative journalist, it's also a good source of income, for example, for spin doctors and campaign strategists working for Orban, who then pretend that they can sell this magic weapon to other politicians in Central Europe, that if you employ us in your campaign, I'm going to show you how Viktor Orban did it. I'm going to show you how to stay in power. I'm going to show you how to crush your opponents by polarizing societies. And in some countries, these campaign strategists who are really close to Orban, they were successful. I mean, they were very active, for example, in Slovakia. In other countries, like in Poland, where the society reacts in a different way to these campaign strategies, they were not that successful during your previous parliamentary elections.
Thank you. So there is one more point, I guess I should ask you, Professor Tzu-Li. It concerns, Professor Zamęcki also mentioned it, but you also mentioned it at the beginning. One is the question about the military threat to a country, how it works with democracy. And then there is this specific thing about Taiwan, which is Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. Probably all of you know it, even if you are not aware of it. It's everywhere. So it's a cheap, very high quality, cheap producer that has almost as monopoly on some kind of crucial production. So how this new technology, gold, and military threat working with democracy?
Thanks for your question. I think the first answer I would like to use a story. Maybe Professor Zamęcki will agree with me. Most of our foreigner academic friends, they come to Taiwan, always ask me, before I decided to come to Taiwan, and my family, my friend always say, you are crazy. Why you go to Taiwan? They are going to have a war. Why are you so, broad to go to Taiwan? And since they arrived Taiwan, they will feel Taiwan are much secure than most of the places in the world. So since we have democracy in 1990s, and according to China's economic growth, they tend to use the military missiles to strengthen Taiwan's autonomy. So it's not surprise since 1996, our first direct election president, Li Denghui, he went to American University Cornell and said a democratic speech. After that, and the China, they launched the missile to Taiwan. So for us, this kind of military is almost every day. Actually, every year they send the aircraft across the middle line of Taiwan Strait. It's almost over 5,000 times. So it's our regular life to dealing with this military threat. And as I said, to deal with this threat, and of course we do worry. So some people believe that if we accept one China principle, and we are, saying this, and then they may not, or they may have a peace agreement with Taiwan, then we can keep our daily life and maintain our democracy. However, China, they are not stupid. They not only want you, one China principle, they want you a real. So when people see the case in Hong Kong, when people see the case in COVID-19, they lock down the city. And when we see the case that China support Russia invade Ukraine, and we know that if we accept this kind of one China principle, and then we will lose our choice. We will lose our freedom to decide our identity and our destiny, for sure. So that's why, of course, we are not always one voice. We have different voice, but that present we are democracy. So I think this kind of military threat and bring us kind of belief that if we, like China, always want to use the violence to conquer the enemy or a small country like Taiwan, then it's not acceptable. That's the first one. And the second one is people always say semiconductor, TSMC, can semiconductor like a silicon shield to protect Taiwan. I won't say semiconductor will protect Taiwan. The only thing can protect Taiwan is our defense power, our military power, how much missile we can have and to defend ourselves. Yes, and some people, they say, now TSMC, they invest American, they invest Germany, they invest Japan. And also we have a factory, TSMC have a factory in China. But I have to say that TSMC is a global company. It's not only a Taiwan company. Think about this scenario. If we Taiwan, we only have TSMC. Every college student only study engineering. And all the talent, all the money go for TSMC. And then it become like destroy our economic structure, which is not health. So we are happy to see TSMC going to, everywhere of all. We extend our national power to the other country, which for me is very correct. And we're using that, have become our interest, become the other interest. We merge our interests. At the same time, we make more money and buy more weapons and more missiles to protect Taiwan. Because I think it's a fake news about American suspicion theory or skeptical theory. Why? Because we cannot put our destiny or our trust in American. It's not for real. We need to trust ourselves. You think if we can protect, defend ourselves, then we can think about after we can insist 2 weeks, 3 weeks like Ukraine, then we will get the support from Democratic Alliance. But it's not always we can assume. So the only we make our democratic stronger, our democracy stronger, our people are willing to protect democracy, then we can protect ourselves longer.
Thank you so much. Professor Zamęcki, I will go, if you allow me, to round 3 because I'm stressed that we will not get what is most important, which is how to mitigate or counter. I don't know if we actually should focus on mitigating or be more combative, whatever it means, counter this democratic backsliding trends. So generally, I don't know, if you think that there is, Poland was supposed to be the country that has the know-how, how to stop it. It seems not necessarily. So are there any good methods, ideas you see? Are the parts of society and elites that believe in liberal democracy already in this mitigation or combative mood, or still shocked by what's going on?
I started the presentation today with, let's say, discussion and the use of the concept of democratic backsliding. So I could add another one with the terms like democratic resilience or democratic mitigation, because this is now the, let's say, evolving area of studies. Because we already, let's say, conceptualized the issue of democratic backsliding, and now we have a research question how to defend the democracy. But I'm afraid that the ways to defend democracy are not so, sorry for that term, sexy for public opinion, and this is the issue because.
I guess you mentioned before that the core issue, the core problem is the crisis of narrative. So.
Exactly. This is my feeling. So this is, let's say, not research based, but my feeling that we need to grasp again the narration why democracy is important. And Professor Lin mentioned, for instance, the security issue. This discussion about the securitization, the conflict, wars, and so on, change the core. Elements, aspects, values of the democracy, because democracy is about freedom, pluralism, debates, discussion, control of power. And nowadays, we more focus in that discourse and narration, not about, let's say, freedom and pluralism, but about order and security, yes? Because there are existential threats, yes? So we need to combat, we need to fight with those threats and so on. So we lost the narration, because we do not talk anymore about freedom and pluralism. We do not talk about dialogue, but we talked about suspicions, yes? I'm afraid that this is not the good way to defend the democracy when we give, let's say, the floor to that populist narration. I already mentioned that, for instance, democracy is not about speed, pace, but about efficiency, let's say. So how to make this efficiency again more interesting for the students, for the young people. So many people in Poland were, let's say, surprised by the support for one of the candidates during last presidential election, which is less, let's say, devoted to democratic values, that he was supported by the young people. So how to grasp that narration again? Control of power. Yes, this is democracy about. But no, we are now talking about, let's say, this executive aggrandizement and how to make this government, president, let's say, very reinforced. Let's say this is the problem. So we need to deal with the issue that emergency situations became a kind of normalized, and we need to think how to change it again, that emergency situations are emergency situations, so from time to time, but they are not, let's say, daily issues, daily base. So this is probably the issue of let's say, reinforcing democracy and mitigation the threats. Thank you.
So maybe, Professor, if you allow me, Tzu-Li, I will ask you, because you seem to be winning still on the narrative. So as I understand from what you are saying, in Taiwan, there is wide enough assumption that democracy is more effective, actually, for the people than China's model that they are military trying to enforce on you. Do you have any other lessons or tips for the times of democratic backsliding? What to do?
You mean facing the challenge from populism or from China? Which one?
Whatever. I mean, as I understand, there are many causes or roots of this democratic backsliding around the world. So which methods, where do you see the rescue? How to face this problem? From your experience or based on your knowledge?
So far, our performance in economy is okay. I think this is the key point. People feel they are suitable in society. And as the professor already mentioned, if in this society, the majority of people feel they are the loser, left behind. And then they will believe that democracy is not good for us. For example, I think the experience of European Union is the best for the world. However, I believe in many countries, many people, they doubt the function of the European Union. So people always doubt, criticize our system. But the purpose is we want it better, not destroy it. So the point that we face the criticize about democracy is we believe we want it better, not because we want to change our political system to the other system, autocracy. So I think economy is important. The social justice is important. Education is important. And not every democratic country, they are facing the backsliding. Yes, it's the case. We need to monitor our government to check if they doing something. Because especially I think the dangerous in Taiwan is the government always like to use the name of safety, the name of security, the name of everything, and want to get more power from people. They want to hurt our freedom. Why? Because I want to protect you from the threat from China. So that's the thing we need to be aware that although we want security, but also we want to maintain our freedom. Otherwise, we are going to somewhere where we don't like. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. And Szabolcs, you've been, I think, the longest. Your battle has been the longest of the people here. Yes. So what are your ideas, golden recipes?
Well, I'm not fighting any battles. I'm just working on stories, and I think the key here is all these populist regimes are trying to crack down on independent and free media because they don't want their true faces to be seen by the people. And that's our job to show that these people, for some reasons, who always talk about national sovereignty, who always talk about being a modest man of the people, in reality, they tend to be billionaires. They tend to steal from their own people. And I can give you an example. In Hungary, my colleagues working for Direct 36, it's a small nonprofit outlet. They published an hour-long investigative documentary into Viktor Orban's family's enrichment, and it became extremely popular in Hungary, garnered 3.7 million views on YouTube in a country of 9.7 million. And of course, it also triggered very nasty attacks by the government on us, and that's because this is usually the Achilles heel of authoritarian leaders, that when journalists or when activists show how corrupt they are, how immensely rich they are becoming during their rule, and to show that their opposition to liberal democracy not only stems from what they're saying, that it's inefficient, that it's corrupt, but it also stems from their will to try to make public life so untransparent that they can do whatever they want behind their populist slogans. So I think that bringing more transparency and working either as activists or as journalists to uncover corruption, abuses of power, or just to show the hypocrisy of these leaders, it's the most efficient way of, as it was said, of regaining, setting the narrative, for example. And just one more thing, that in the case of Hungary, we have a government that's talking all the time about defending Hungarian national sovereignty. Obviously, this is something that's also copy-pasted elsewhere, and it also originates from Russia. But when it comes to reality, defending sovereignty only applies to defending sovereignty from our allies, from the European Union or from the United States. But at the same time, it also comes with a very a distinct alliance building with Russia and with China. And the thing is that when you defend your country's sovereignty by siding with your enemies, I think that should raise questions in people's minds.
I have to ask one more question, if you allow me, because what you are saying means that you still believe that exposing corruption or hypocrisy or abuse of power in a traditional fact-based journalistic way is still working, because you know what I mean, algorithms and affection-based communication.
Yeah, what we learned is that obviously people don't care about corruption stories if these are written in very long and complicated articles. But if you show a picture of Viktor Orban's son-in-law with his Ferrari, then that suddenly sticks. If an investigative journalist travels to the Mediterranean Sea and captures the footage of our foreign minister vacationing on a yacht while he's pretending that he's in his office and dealing with foreign affairs, then these things work. So we live in a society that favors audiovisual footage. So we have to create investigative material that can also be distributed in this way, and it can be efficient. Yes.
Thank you. So, Professor Wojciuk, the last but not least, so far we have very much focused on the narrative and effective communication, I guess, so the ideas and how to communicate them effectively. In your book, the book that you co-authored, Let's Agree on Poland, you focus more on the political system. What you propose is decentralization, as I understand, as a measure, as a method to counter polarization. So can you say a little bit more, or can you mention any other methods or ideas that are around that seem to be more than less effective?
So since I already advertised it, I will not focus so much on it right now. I believe on the side, on the democratic side, we really badly need innovations, which will help us to deal with those phenomena. And on a philosophical side, if I may, I believe it's like a really Hegelian dialectics of struggle between the slave and the master. And from this, of course, from the point of view of opposition and investigative journalists in countries dominated by authoritarian forces, it looks different. But in countries like Poland, I really think that liberal elites need to do a deep emotional and intellectual work and really understand the other side without this feeling of superiority, which is very common, and I think it's not helpful. Not only among politicians, which in a recent campaign showed some amazing examples of lack of empathy, lack of understanding of the context, but it's not only politicians, these are also intellectuals. I think really we need to be more humble and understand it. Also, when we explain biographies of people like Karol Nawrocki, because how we perceive it can be very different from what other people perceive it, and not really helpful. So I think this is my first point. The second point is I believe we need to try to find compromise with the right, and as you said, I think that decentralization of issues on which we do not agree and which are vital for the everyday lives of ordinary people can really help to ease those tensions. I'm not talking about strategic issues, but things like education. If people want to have 3 hours of religion at school, let them do that. This is my point. If you try to eradicate conservative curricula, religion from schools, you will fuel more anger, more backlash. So I think that the very, very ambitious and hegemonic agenda of the liberal side needs to be compromised. Of course, I think we have to protect places where the majority of people believe in liberal values, protect them against the right, but really slow down and stop to believe that we will enlighten the other side. On the other hand, they are not going to convert us. That's not happening. We are split half-half. And finally, yes, I think that we need to, in countries like Poland, which went through this and has a dismantled system of checks and balances. For now, it's not working. We rise in indicators, but it's only because the site which is liked by those who code it is coding it. But nothing changed in the system. We don't have constitutional court. We have problems with the Supreme Court and so on. I think we need to find a way to rebuild institutions which will be neutral arbiters in the game between the liberal side, the liberal left side, and the conservative side. We have a number of ideas. Let's involve more local governments in electing them. Let's be closer to the people. In a genuine manner, because I think for now the liberal side is still counting that the other side will be enlightened, that it will disappear, that its support will grow to 25% of, or as one of very important ministers in the current government told me just after elections in 2023, we will strangle them. We will not strangle them. Thank you.
Okay, so we don't have much time. I'm sorry about that. I failed. I hope that we started 5 minutes later and we will have 5 more minutes, but it seems impossible. So are there any urgent questions, maybe? Please, sir.
Just very short one. We streamed, so I'm sorry, but most of you can vote.
My name is Sławomir Malcz. I am sociologist. I wanted to call to everybody in this room not to call one side democratic side and the other populist side, because it really is not true. Populism is something like we were talking the previous day, like migration. It exists. It is context of political life. Likewise, social media that are dominating the public debate and pushing back traditional media experts that used to previously be the moderating factor in the public debate. It is not longer now. Now,
can we have the question, please?
Yes. I think I just wanted to give ask a question. Don't you think that the election have been won not by this or that side recently in Poland, but by third part and social media, and that is the clue of that is the answer. We have people of right-wing or conservative values. Okay, so sorry, that was the question. Thank you.
I don't know. Anybody would like to?
I could on democratic side, because I think I use it the most. So to be honest, I have nothing against populism. I have nothing against conservatives. I have nothing against the right. But I believe that it's authoritarian right, and I think we should name it as it is. So I think I'm willing to call the right, the right-wing parties democratic. This is not by definition, and also a lot of populists are democratic. But we have the problem with autocratic populism, and I think that's how we should call it, because this is one of the big battles which is going on, whether democracies will survive. This is my point of view.
I don't know, Szabolcs, would you like one word about social media? I think we...
One more very, very short question.
Thank you for this fascinating discussion. I guess it was Łukasz Zamęcki who said that democracy is about discussion and debate. And my question would be, in fact, how democratic are then democratic governments, or these governments we call democratic, in terms of discussion and debate? And okay, I'm somehow referring to the Polish case, but I guess it's not only about Poland. Okay, so if we just define democracy in such a way, so how democratic are these governments we describe as democratic?
Because, sorry, I couldn't hear. So how we describe the democracy in democratic governments?
No, how democratic are our governments?
Are our...
The ones that we call democratic, are they really?
In that sense, okay. Okay, I think that I mentioned that a bit, that we lost the narration, let's say, that we gave the floor to that autocratic populist narration, and this is, I believe, not the best way to deal with the threats, democratic threats we have. We need to, let's say, move that debates again to show, I use that term again, not very politically correct, but how to make this democracy more sexy again, yes, to prove to the young people that this is the best way to deal with and manage with the issue. And we have the research on that it's more efficient. Democratic way of management is more efficient, of course, with the leadership, inclusive leadership.
Thank you very much. I believe that we already about 30% into the coffee break.
Brief point on this, because my point was the following. Maybe it's not that much about narrative, but how, in fact, we are making the democracy. That's the problem, yeah. This is maybe what we're lacking. We lack a real discussion, a real debate. This is what Ania also said before. Maybe this is the reason. It's not only about narratives. That's the point.
Or social media.
All right, so
I would like that line.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's put together our hands to the panel for, I'm not reading the names are there. To really let you enjoy the morning coffee. Thank you.